What's up? It's Mike Mal, and you are listening to the Athletor Podcast, where we dive into the processes, mindsets, strategies of some of the most successful athletes and coaches from all walks of life. Athletor Podcast, and I clap when I do that. I don't know why, but it pops the mic, and I've been told not to do that anymore. But I'm a rebel, and so are you, Donny Pritzlaff. Thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Come on, man. I don't think people understand just how, I don't want to use the word reclusive, but darn near reclusive you are, especially when it comes to cameras. So when I asked you in the sauna if you would do this interview, you almost looked at me like, I can't say no to you now, right? So really, truly, thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you even asking me. So I'm excited. I'm excited. We were sweating together in there, and what are we gonna do? I have to say yes to you. And I've known you forever.
What are you gonna say? You're gonna say no?
I'd never say I would never say no to you. Come on.
Okay. So one of the things that we like to do on this podcast is try our best to break down the processes that make successful people successful. You have had a tremendous amount of success both as an athlete and as a coach. What process? But here's the thing about, and I feel obligated to explain just how big of a badass you are to people, because you're never going to say it yourself. So in your estimation, what processes led to your success the most as an athlete and then as a coach?
Processes, probably, I'd say my discipline and my inner drive were probably two of the best best attributes that I had as an athlete. And I would say luck was probably something that I was fortunate enough to have just by meeting Ernie Monaco at a young age. And, Glenn going to Ernie at the edge in Belleville when it started. So I was around really high-level people at a young age that knew how to coach, knew how to teach technique, knew how to break things down, knew how to make it super competitive, but also fun at the same time. And I think a lot of things that I try to do as a coach now, I look back at even from when I was a kid, 8, 9 years old, up and all the way through. And then when Ernie moved to Kenilworth, I still think Ernie's the best coach in the country, in the world. Even he's amazing the way he's able to dissect things and go over technique, and then also the way he built the foundation of my wrestling, and then exposed me to high level wrestling and high level people. And I owe pretty much my whole career to him, because he was the first coach that really showed me what it was like to possibly dream about being one of the best in the world.
So anytime I get an edge guy on here, and I'm not excluded from this, right? Yeah. I trumpet the Monaco way as much as I can. But every time I get an edge guy on this podcast, they don't talk about their high school coaches, and they certainly don't really talk about their college coaches. They talk about Ernie, and it's, to me, it's more of an impact on the entire sport than anybody really gives him credit for. I mean, I want you to try your best to paint a picture of just how unique the Edge School of Wrestling was especially when Glenn started going there back in the late 80s, early 90s, right? Because by the time you and I were in Kenilworth, there were Siegel and Hammer down in Lakewood, and there were other wrestling clubs that followed in Ernie's footsteps. But how novel was the concept of a full-time wrestling academy in I think it was 86 or 87 when he started.
Yeah, well, it all really started with Ernie's father, Ernie Sr., and he was he had a gymnastics background. So he wasn't really a wrestling guy per se, but he knew that there was a system that needed to be in place by following all these gymnastics academies. And Ernie kind of implemented that same system where there were different levels you had to get to. And, Ernie followed that same model where you weren't just learning moves, you were learning positions and situations. And as you built and you mastered these different situations and positions, then you'd move on to the next, kind of similar to how they do it in gymnastics. So I think that was probably one of the most unique things that Ernie was doing. Also, he implemented a lot of video analysis and showing even young kids that really were just learning how to sprawl and learning how to penetrate in different ways. He was showing them the highest level guy, like Sergey Small was on the videos, Arsen Fitzayev, guys that Dave Schultz was constantly talked about. So we were young and still kind of vanilla on what we really needed to learn, but we were being exposed to the highest level. So I think that gave us a long-term vision of what we could possibly become if we started mastering these little blocks along the way. So, and I see Ernie, he's still doing it to this day with
still doing it.
Yeah.
I can fall into a complete technique nerd conversation with him, and I haven't seen him in years, right? Yeah. I haven't seen him in probably 4 years. I could fall into a conversation with him about what Musakayev is doing for Hungary and winning world titles with it, like it was a seamless conversation, like we just seen each other last week.
Yeah.
All right. And I want to stick on the Ernie technique theme for now. What was Ernie doing differently technically in your estimation in 1990-ish to 96, 98? What was he doing differently than anyone else in the state and the country was doing? To me, there was a couple things, but I just want to hear it from you.
Well, I think he was producing champions. So knowing that, you went into that room believing that someday I'm going to be like Junior Nardone. I'm going to be like Carl Monaco. I'm going to be like these guys that had great success at the high school level. Because when you're a kid, you're looking to high school. And then when you're in high school, you're starting to look to these college guys and how they're doing. So there was a belief factor when you went in there that, wow, if I listen to Ernie and do what he's telling me to do, I'm going to have great success as well. So I think that was one thing. So you totally believed in what he was teaching, what he was doing, because he was producing great wrestlers. And then he also, he has a knack for even the most basic things, making it seem cool, right? Like everybody wants to learn these crazy moves and different things, but he was able to make it cool to learn how to really get your hips in and turn your feet out when you're sprawling, and how to finish a front head correctly and go behinds and down blocking. So things that are so basic and so simple, he was able to, it was cool.
Dude, I can't help but interrupt you. I'm sorry. He made me think head position on a high single was the coolest thing in the entire world. Like, he made me think that just getting my head up into somebody's chest was like, that's the tits. Like, that's it. Like, but how much of that do you use today when you're dealing with college and international style athletes?
Yeah, I'm all of it. All of that. I mean, when we're getting ready for the home stretch and into the Big Tens and the NCAAs, we're talking about crossing the line first, having your head in the way, so you're down blocking correctly, so you can create counterattacks, and getting the guys to believe in that's just as valuable as being able to jump over and scramble and funk and win a crackdown position, all those things. So understanding that the basics are still relevant. And like you're saying, Ernie would talk about head position on a high single and hitting the ribs and hitting with your shoulder, and then showing a video of a guy hitting a radar, Dave Schultz hitting radar singles, and saying like, wow, this guy's doing this in the Olympic Games. So this must be something that's very useful to adopt into my own wrestling style. So he was able to kind of meld that together, where it wasn't always like the crazy move that was going to work. Now he was always open to all that too. Like he knew all the crazy techniques and the wild scrambles and crazy things that could happen out there, but he was also so locked in and focused on the basics that as an athlete and a kid that went to his club, you bought into that, again, because you believe that was going to help you be successful.
And you would believe correctly, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
the foundational support that I gained from that room has served me very well in the rest of my life. It truly has. Like, it has served me beyond belief for the rest of my life. Now, you were talking about like scrambles and funk and stuff like that. When Askren hit the scene in let's call it 05-ish, right? When he wrestled Herbert on ESPN, to me, that was the true birthplace of scramble wrestling in this country. Now, were there guys doing it before him? Yes, of course. Cooperman pisses and moans every time I give Askren credit for anything having to do with scramble, because Coop was doing it, but Coop didn't do it on ESPN, right? Like, so, yeah. And Ben did, and Ben took apart Jake Herbert, who looked, he looked like a He-Man figure, and Ben did not. That's putting it politely. And so how much of that, because you were the opposite, you were front headlock, you were swing single, you were the opposite of that.
Yeah.
How much of that did you have to accept as a coach and as an athlete at the same time, right? How much of that did you have to accept, kind of digest, and go, all right, well, this is the way of the sport right now?
Yeah.
And how much did it affect you as a coach and an athlete?
Yeah, I think the scrambling, in the beginning, like you're saying, like in the early 2000s, when Askren and I know, Cooperman was big on that as well. But when that started to really take center stage, like, this is how wrestling is evolving, it's going in this direction, and now you very rarely see a clean takedown. So if you're
I agree.
If your athletes aren't skilled at being able to, if you're a leg attack guy, you have to be very skilled and understand what the funk and the scrambling is going to be about. So I think there's a lot of value in teaching your team and having your team understand, okay, because there's going to be very few clean takedowns, I have to understand what's this guy's next step? What's his next position that he's looking to get to, so I can stay ahead of him and finish and score. So I think there's a ton of value. I mean, we spend a lot of time in different situations just getting guys in on legs and getting them disoriented, because it's not always going to be a simple finishing process. There's going to be a lot of situations where you end up in a bad spot because the guy's just maybe a step ahead of you at that moment. So wrestling is always evolving. It's going to continue to evolve. There's definitely trends that happen, and guys get good at different positions and different techniques. And then you have to be able to try to stay ahead of that curve. And as a coach, if you're saying, well, we're not going to do any funk, we're not going to teach you, well, you're going to lose, because because
you're stubborn, you're a stubborn ass, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
So, all right. So how do you, being as milk and steak and potatoes as you are when it comes to wrestling technique, how do you get how often do you get your guys into positions where they're forced to scramble? How often?
Almost every day. I'd say daily, because of the way wrestling is now. Guys they're willing to sacrifice their bodies to put themselves in crazy scenarios to get out of situations. And some of these situations are cutthroat. So as a coach, you have to be careful where you're dropping your ego down a little bit and understanding that everybody's joints have limitations, because injuries will happen in these crazy situations. But I think that you need to be in there constantly, understanding how to finish a shin wizard, how to finish on the edge of the mat, how to finish when guys are diving through. And I mean, there's so many scenarios. And I think as we started getting closer to like peaking season, end of the year, we're picking a handful of situations that we know we're going to be in, and that your opponents are going to put you in. So, focusing on them and really maximizing your time too, right? There's the body can only take so much of the hard training. So maximizing time and being really calculated on how much you're doing, but also making sure that you have the feel and you've been there before. So when the moment takes place, you're able to catch that moment at the right time.
2024 leading into the postseason, what were the positions that you had to address in the room leading into the postseason? What positions were you going, dang it, we got Penn State's freaking good here. We got to get here. What positions were you in?
Scrambling specifically, we were in like a lot of far ankle scramble position, which can happen from anywhere. Maybe you're riding the guy, you end up there. Maybe you're in on a shot, you end up there. So we were doing a lot of that. Edge of the mat finishing. So in on the leg, up in the air, edge of the mat. I'd say a deficiency that our team has, and I see it around the country, is a single leg in the air and not totally up all the way to your armpit, but in between your legs, trying to.
Kids are freaking good there now, Don. Kids are freaking good there.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, let me tell you something. My dopey son is better with his foot in the freaking air than he is with like a shin whiz. He just is. He's freaking good there. And here's the deal. The offensive wrestler, the longer you go without scoring, the less likely you are to score, for sure. Whether it be frustration, whether it be exhaustion, whether it's whatever, you're just less likely to score. So it kind of goes back to basics, right? Like we can't just lift the ankle. We got to lift the whole freaking leg, right? Yeah. We got to get that thing up. I'm very encouraged by that, because I thought we just sucked at it. Maybe we do, but either way. All right. I want to go back to one of the words that you used, or one of the words that you attributed to your success, especially as an athlete, and it's discipline. You were an extremely disciplined athlete. I can't imagine that that's not true about your coaching style. But that's not true of every single kid that walks into Jersey Mike's Arena. Okay, that is not true. Okay, I'm just venturing to guess. How do you deal with a lack of discipline in your athletes? Because something tells me you, especially as you were a younger man in the coaching world, you probably had a hard time computing that, like understanding, like, what do you mean you're not going to be disciplined? You want to be successful, don't you? Yeah. Well, okay. So how do you deal with that now as a more seasoned coach?
Yeah, I think early on in your coaching career, you're like, well, if you're not doing it this way, if you're not disciplined in your lifestyle, if you're not disciplined in your training, you're not going to be successful. And it's easy to just say, that's it. That's the bottom line. But the reality is wrestling is a unique sport, as many sports are. And there's a lot of different ways to win a wrestling match. So that goes from, how you train, how disciplined you are, how attentive you are to details. And so some guys they have different styles. They have different styles, and they're able to find ways to win that, necessarily I wouldn't probably do it that way. But if it works for them, then I think there's still the preaching of being more disciplined, doing things a certain way is going to help you, but your way is working to a point. But how can we get you to the next level? How can we hone in on a few different areas in your life or how you're training that can ultimately lead you to have even greater success? So I think it's dialogue with the athlete. I think just trying to change guys and make them all one-dimensional or your style as a coach, I don't think that's necessarily the best way, because guys come to you with all different skill sets, all different things that they do well, that they don't do well, and then you have to try to, I think, develop what's their style going to be. And Ernie talked about that a lot too. He said every guy's going to have their individual style. You might say like he's similar to him, but sure, every guy's going to have their own unique style, body type, strength, flexibility, all those kind of things that go into it. So I think it's just a matter of trying to blend all those different areas together and turn out the best product of the guy that you can. So, and discipline is definitely one of them. Getting guys a little bit more disciplined to move the needle a little bit. I think that's something that we try to do, and I know I try to do it as well. Just getting them to understand and communicating to them that if you do things maybe this way a little bit more, you're going to have more success. And then them seeing it for themselves sometimes is even more important. Them understanding like, wow, this week I did this and I had this result and it was really good and I was successful, and maybe I need to go down that path a little bit more than doing some things, reverting back to things that weren't working for me.
I'm curious, obviously you see a lot of new kids every year that come through the Rutgers program. Are there any common themes when it comes to discipline of, hey, all these guys are coming in and they're all struggling with this common thing?
Well, in college wrestling, for sure, it's bottom wrestling. Bottom wrestling is always something that's rarely do you have a guy come in and they're like, they can get out on everybody. They're not getting ridden. They're not even just struggling a little bit and wasting time in matches on bottom where, they could be scoring on their feet or pushing the pace more on their feet. So I think bottom's always an issue coming in. I think it's a strength factor. I think it's a core strength factor specifically, where guys come in and their cores and their hips are underdeveloped and most of the guys that are really successful in high school aren't spending much time on bottom. They're not getting ridden. They're barely even getting taken down. So they don't have that experience down there. So I think that's probably one of the biggest common themes. And then on top of that, like a lifestyle thing, I would say is time management. Because when you get into college, you don't have your mom and dad making sure you're going to club, making sure you're going to class, making sure you're here, you don't have your family surrounding you constantly with their thumb on you. So you have a lot more time on your hands where you think you have a lot more time on your hands. And the reality is you don't. You have to be studying, you have to be watching film, you have to be, eating properly. So you have all these different things where maybe as a high school kid, it was all laid out for you and kind of handed to you. Now you're kind of having to create those same habits that you necessarily didn't have to create when you were younger.
What is the number? So before we get to the next question, can you describe to the listeners the process at Rutgers, right? So to me, you guys have a pretty unique process. First of all, Goody's in the room and has hands on every single day. I don't know that there are many head coaches that do that every single day. You are more, I don't want to say recruitment, but from what I understand, you are more involved with the selection process of people to recruit. Is that about right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Can you describe like what that process looks like to somebody that might not know from this end of the country?
Yeah, I think probably the first when we're identifying recruits or potential prospects coming in, it's usually weight class need, right? So such and such wrestler is getting close to his junior year. or a senior, he's going to be moving on. So now we need this weight class, right? So then we're targeting athletes that are potentially going to be in that weight. Now it's never a perfect system, but so that's probably one of the main things that we're looking at. We need this weight class. This guy, he has interest in Rutgers, right? So once we identify if it seems like we're interested in them, they're interested in us, then we start moving forward in the whole process, right? So I think that's a lot of outreach to coaches, outreach to the kid himself, seeing if he's the right fit. So when we're identifying, that's kind of how we're doing it. A lot of times it is weight class need, then it's the matter if they're interested, right? Because I think in the beginning of the relationship, if you're talking them into being interested, it's not going to work. So them understanding our program, understanding, being educated on what we do, where we're located, wanting to, venture out to the, a kid from California wanting to make the trip all the way across the country, a kid from Ohio that's living in a rural community, wanting to be in a more city-like atmosphere. So trying to find that fit. And then, it's always, obviously there's a talent factor. They have to be at a certain level. And then, identifying that level, seeing them train, seeing them practice, watching them train, see the little things when they're training, the little things when they're practicing, like that are important to me are, does it still seem like there's a joy about it? Are they still wanting to learn? Are they still asking questions, or are they just checking a box and, punching their work hard? So I think that's always a big piece to it too, is like, is there genuine joy in hard training? And that's not, that's a,
what does that look like? What does that look like, Don? It's hard to put your finger on, right?
Yeah. It's hard because sometimes you can fake it. Sometimes you can be trying to talk yourself into wanting to get better, wanting to learn, but Ernie always would make sure that we were asking questions, ask questions, be inquisitive, try to figure things out, try to understand why your hand has to be here. So I think when you get kids that are really into the whole science of the sport, the science of nutrition, the science of weight training that's going to transfer to actual wrestling. So kids that are really interested in those kind of things, I think when they get to the next level, they don't want to fail. So they're going to continue to be that same open-minded athlete that wants to get better, wants to learn, wants to develop. So, identifying that and watching them in practice and seeing how they're talking to their coaches, asking their coaches question. You're going in to do a clinic. How much are they locked into the technique? How hard are they going when it's a hard go, or do they understand how to drop their ego when they're sparring? Things like that. You're looking at all those kind of situations and trying to paint a picture and see if that's the right fit for your program. So it's a lot of intangibles. It's not like, oh, that guy has a great double leg. Right. That guy's really strong. Those are great attributes too. But that's only going to take you so far. Are you willing to use that strength and use that technique, and are you able to build on that, right? Because those are the guys that are going to continue to get better. Those are the guys that are coming into the room with a purpose every day to improve and get better.
What would you say is the number one attribute that you look for in a recruit? Because at this point in 2024, everybody's a doggone athlete. Like these kids are freak athletes. Like even Jake, we got kids that are not starting on our varsity team that can round off back tuck like it's nobody's business. So everybody's an athlete. So what are you looking for specifically? And one thing above all in a kid that is going to make you reach out to them?
I think the number one attribute for a successful college wrestler is mental toughness. And that's kind of an intangible. It's hard to you can't really measure that. You can.
I don't know. How did they perform on the back end of the Super 32 bracket?
Exactly.
That's a good way. That's a good way of figuring it out.
Yeah.
Because I've seen kids make it to the quarterfinals, okay, of Super 32, lose in the quarters,
Mm-hmm.
and then lose immediately. Now,
Yeah.
was that yeah, it sucks. But if it becomes a trend, right, then you got to kind of look at that as a big old red flag. Yeah.
So, but I definitely think that that's the number one attribute, mental toughness, because I think it goes into so many different areas. It's being able to handle the hard training, being able to handle all the challenging partners you're going to have every day, being able to make changes in your own wrestling that maybe you're deficient in an area and you avoid it. Are you mentally tough enough to spend the time to get better in that area? Are you mentally tough enough to put the video game controller down and understand that you need to hit the books, or you need to get your rest, or you need to eat properly? So to me, that's all mental toughness. And then obviously the mental toughness in a match when you're starting to be fatigued and you're starting to be tired. And do you have that last ditch effort to get the final takedown to win that match, or scramble out of a position that is going to cost you the match, or you're going to turn down and bail? So I think things like that are attributes that are, it's not easily taught either. I mean, it's something that you can talk about, you can read books about it, you can do all those kind of things, but if you're not practicing that mental toughness on a daily basis, then it's going to be tough to perform in a tough manner when it really matters.
How, in your opinion, what is the best way to develop a mentally tough athlete? Because look, let's be honest, it's pretty easy for us to develop mentally tough athletes, because freshmen don't score in our room. Like, they just don't score for 6 months.
Yeah.
It's just, and you better be tough or you better get out, right? Like, we had a kid that is a Fargo All-American. He's 4 deep in his weight class this year. He went and played soccer. I don't blame him. I mean, look, it is what it is.
Yeah.
He's a heck of a soccer player. Okay. So it's easy for us.
Yeah.
But what if you're in rural, I don't know, Wisconsin or rural, then you don't have the partners that we do? How do you think you can develop a kid to be mentally tougher than anybody around him?
Yeah. And that's why I talk about being lucky, because I was exposed to Ernie and all those partners that we had in Belleville and then in Kenilworth. So, I think there is definitely, like you're saying, access to great coaching, access to great partners is a huge building block in getting you to the next level. So now a kid that doesn't have that access, they have to find other ways to, and now with videos and training videos and all sorts of different things that are out there, you can find different ways to challenge yourself and become more mentally tough. And then so if you can do that, on your own, maybe with a strength coach or watching videos of how to do really hard things and execute them, and then go and challenge yourself at some of these bigger tournaments that are all over the country on a weekly basis now, which is amazing. You can find great wrestling all the time now, which is awesome, all around the country. So
sure,
I think, then that's the real test. So you're kind of doing the guess and test method. So you're working on different things to try to challenge yourself, whether it's run a mile in a certain amount of time, or all these different exercises you could be doing that really challenge you, because you don't have the partners, so you're challenging yourself that way, and then going out there and then trying to, wrestle and compete against some of the best guys and see where you're at. And, I definitely think, though, having a coach that can help you through that is always a huge benefit. So
it is possible too, right? Like, I mean, look at the kids now from Kentucky, right? They got 2 brothers from Kentucky. Those Rainy kids are tougher now. Now.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, it's possible. Is it easier to do at St. Ed's? Sure,
Yeah.
for sure. No question about it. But is it possible? Yeah, we can do it all over the country. And I don't know that that's a new thing either, right? Like I think, you look at guys like Brandon Slay, right?
Yep.
Brandon Slay was from Nowheresville, Texas, right? And he goes on to NCAA finals and Olympic gold medal. So it is possible, right? Okay. People might not know this because they think that you probably live in a cave somewhere and just with skulls around you at all times of the bones of your enemies. But you are a dad as well.
Yep.
Let's talk about parenting and wrestling. If your girls wrestle, it's great, but if they don't, that's fine too. But here's my question to you. If you were going to raise a young wrestler, what would their competition schedule look like before 12 years old and after 12 years old?
Okay. For me, both my daughters dance. They're
okay.
Not competitive dancers. They're more ballet, lyrical, jazz.
Sure.
And
okay.
They're both high level dancers, and they train constantly. They train constantly, almost all year round, I would say. My younger one, all year round. My older one, she takes a break for the most part over the summer. But they're constantly training, and then they only get to perform maybe 8 shows a year, right? So they're training all year round for those 8 shows. Now, I think kids that when they're younger, they need to buy into the training more than the competing. And so, and I know that's not always easy because you see all these other kids that are out there winning all these different competitions all over the country. So I just think that in the perfect world, which is never going to be perfect, but in the perfect world, you would train, compete, and then have some time after the competition to evaluate the competition, train for an extended period after that, and then compete again. And I know in season it doesn't always happen that way, but I think that
it can though, Don,
yeah,
right?
It can. You can make your own schedule. You can make your own
That's what I'm saying. Like these people, like why are we beholden to I gotta get a dual meet on Wednesday and I gotta get a tournament on Saturday? I don't know that we need to do that anymore, right? I think that there's different models out there. So you're saying like 12 and under, would probably be 6, 8, 10 competitions a year. And if you're going,
I believe in that. I know, and again, everybody's different, and everybody has their own formula for how they think they can be successful and how they are successful. So I don't. That's not going to work for everybody. I just feel like there needs to be more of an emphasis on the training part of it, as opposed to constantly competing in these cycles all the time. Because what are you developing? All you're developing is how to win a match, and that's an important skill too. But I think at the younger levels, are you understanding the sport? Are you learning the positions? Are you getting better at the positions? Are you seeing improvement every time you're out there, or are you just finding a way to win every time, or finding a way to lose every time? I just think you could be, there's a much greater risk, I think, of being burnt out by constantly competing only, as opposed to putting more value in the training part of it and becoming a more well-rounded athlete. Like I know there's a huge trend in all sports now where at a young age, I'm focusing on this sport only. And I think that takes away some of your athleticism. I think as you get older, you maybe you hone in on one sport or 1 or 2 sports. But I was always at the mindset that I do everything. I played basketball up until when I was in 8th grade. I'd wrestle in a tournament and then go play basketball. I played baseball, football, and anything I could do, I was doing. So I know it's shifted a lot now, where you kind of get the guys are so high level at a younger age that
That's
maybe
yeah.
that
I
doesn't
don't
work.
know. Yeah. It's hard, man. It's a balancing act, right? Because first things first, I wanted my son to play baseball in the worst way.
Yeah,
I wanted him to play baseball, and he's a lefty, and lefties get work, right? Um, and he's, but he just didn't want to. He
yeah,
just wanted to wrestle. So I'm like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna force him. I'm gonna
yeah,
force him till he's in 8th grade. I probably shouldn't do that because I wouldn't tell anybody to force a kid to wrestle,
yeah,
because that's a recipe for disaster. Um, but the kid just wanted to be on the wrestle mat, and we had a good time when he was on the wrestle mat. So
yeah,
it is what it is. But that said, though, he was not allowed to compete, and I lied to him a lot. Like I lied to him, like, yeah, you're not allowed to compete until you're 12. Sorry, bud. He'd be like, Daddy, that boy's like 8 years old. He's at a tournament. Like, I'm like, nah, he just looks young for his age. So, but that said, though, when he did start competing, he had an awful time
yeah,
learning how to manage a win,
yeah,
right? Like up by 30 seconds left. He's out there trying to hit duck. I'm like,
yeah,
but that's okay. You learn,
yeah.
you figure that out, right? How many losses on a year should a kid take? Like, so I heard some, remember the Thorne brothers from Minnesota?
Yep.
So their old man apparently was pretty dialed into training his kids, and he raised a couple All-Americans, so he knows what he's doing a little bit. But he said, and tell me if you kind of subscribe to this. He said, if a kid, my job as a parent or as a dad coach, is to find the kid 5 losses a year. So if he's at a local level and he's taking 5 or more losses, don't move him up. Right.
Yeah.
If he's not, then you go up to a state level until he's, he gets 5 losses, and then national level, and then so on and so forth. Is that a good archetype to kind of follow for young parents?
Yeah. I don't know if there's an exact number that's
Sure.
good, but do you know Dr. Gilbert?
Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So he would always talk about, he was big in the wrestling. I met him through Ernie, sports psychologist, and he would always talk about, if you have an undefeated wrestler, try to find them a loss. Get it. You have to challenge him. So I agree with, Mr. Thorne. I think, especially at a young age, just constantly winning all the time is great, but you have to know there's another level out there. Understanding there's another level that you can get to, because I think that dangles a little bit, dangles the carrot in front of you. So you're constantly chasing something to improve and get better, because I'm not the greatest. I need to continue to work and continue. So I think it gives you the motivation as a kid to understand, like, okay, there's a whole nother world out there that I have to get to. And then once I get there, then there's going to be another level I have to get to. So it's constantly chasing that next level. So I do agree with that. I don't know if there's an exact number. I know that if you're losing probably 15 to 20 times a year, because you're getting put into groups or at levels that are too advanced for you, that might be detrimental to your whole development, because now you're constantly losing, and you're like, why am I even doing this anymore? What's going, so I think there has to be a balance of success with, some defeats as well.
Yeah, no question. All right, Joel, we're running out of time here. You got anything before we get on to those quick questions, brother?
Man, that 45 minutes flew by.
I know. And I got 11 o'clock too. All right, Donnie, here we go, brother. We're going quick questions here. Don't think about these. I just want you to answer right off the dome.
Okay.
Number 1, what is the greatest wrestling shoe of all time?
Asics Super Light. Think or International Light, maybe. International Light.
Oh, how many of those do we have? Like that is yes, of course. Okay. Yes, we have 4 of those. 4 people.
They have the red bottom, I think. It was flat though. Oh, so good. So good.
Yeah, they're good.
Your company there with those is Stephen Neal, John Stutzman, and Mark Hall.
All right.
There you go. I like it. All right. Next question. Got to be American. Only get 4. Okay. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
4. Dave Schultz.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Burroughs.
Mm-hmm.
John Smith. Kendall Cross.
Wow, Kendall's first appearance. Oh, I love it. Why Kendall? Just out of curiosity. And I'm not taking anything away from a 1996 gold medal, and he has the complete opposite style of wrestling than you.
Yeah.
Like, I am so baffled by this. That is the best answer. Go ahead. Please explain Kendall.
I love the guy that just can rise to the occasion, and he made 2 Olympic teams. Right?
Yep.
2 Olympic
People
teams.
don't realize that. Yeah.
Never made a world team.
That's right. Never made a world team.
Right? So
it's pretty cool.
2 Olympic,
and he was not supposed to be Terry. He was not supposed to be Terry, and he was not
No.
supposed to be Gia Sasori at all. Like, nobody gave him a shot against either of them.
And think about this, and I would never do something like this. So maybe that's why, because it's so intriguing to me. But he goes double overs to start the match to throw the guy. I mean,
amazing.
Talk about some guts, Dude,
so. He'll tell you, and like this God, we got to get Kendall on this thing. Dang it. He'll tell you, okay, because don't forget, he was not like a big upper body guy. Like, he was kind of like low singly, scrambly. He was super defensive.
Good front head, good chest lock.
Right. Speaking of which, he had a great high gut, right? Yeah. So he goes double overs, throw for 3 at the time, gets on top and goes 2 chest wrap, high gut, chest wrap out of bounds. Okay. And then you know what he did for the rest of the time? Everyone else? He ran. He ran like he had track shoes on. And there was no such thing as caution. Like, this dude, and don't forget, takedowns were just 1.
Yep.
So how many takedowns has he got to give up? 6.
Wow.
Okay, no problem. He'll tell you. He'll be the first one to tell you. Yeah. God, that is such a great one. I love that call. All right. Last question. That was freaking awesome. If you have a magic wand and you could change one thing about the sport of wrestling, what would it be, Donny Pritzlaff?
Just one thing?
Just one thing.
All right, I'm going to do 1 and 1A. All right.
All right. Love it.
Just one thing? Okay, I'm doing 2.
Tough shit.
1 would be 10 weight classes for men's freestyle at the Olympics.
Okay.
And then 1A would be in college, step out. I hate the he's stalling, he's not stalling on the edge, and 1 point step out.
Makes all the sense in the world.
3-point takedown.
I got to tell you something. Sure, it's fine. 3-point takedown with a step out. Yeah. All of the gray area is gone.
Exactly.
We take all the arbitrary, is he not, out of it. It's nonsense. We have evidence.
Yeah. And I think the wrestling matches would be, not that we want them to be shorter, but guys would adapt and they would wrestle in the middle, just like they do in freestyle. You would not see guys going out of bounds as much.
Yeah. And truth be told, and we've talked about this a ton on this podcast as well, because you're not the first person to use the magic wand for a step out, because it's becoming pretty much a theme. Now, that said, I don't even care about grounding, right? Yeah. Like in freestyle, this grounded shit is too much of a gray area for me too. Your foot goes out of bounds, it's 1 point, period, the end. Let's take all the if, ands, and buts out of the situation. I think we could do that tomorrow. That's the thing. Like, that doesn't take a magic wand, dude. Like, we can do that tomorrow. Like, getting 10 weight classes back on the Olympic platform, that's going to take some doing. Like,
that's why
if we're going to be, that's right. I'll use it for that. But I don't think it's out of the question. I do think something would have to.
Yeah. No.
Suffer.
Yeah.
like Greco probably, like if we're going to be honest, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know that, and 10 might be, I don't know that 10's the right number anyway. Maybe 9. And I know, like, I don't know why we're so beholden to these even numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me the 6th criteria for a dual meet in college? Because I don't know it.
The 6th criteria?
Yeah.
Is
so if you're tied,
I couldn't tell you exactly what it is now.
Do you see what I mean? But it has gone to 6 criteria more than once in the last year. Yeah. Okay. Well, what if we just had 9 weight classes or 11? It's just whoever won the most matches.
That would make more sense.
Yeah. Am I just talking too much sense now? Well, maybe too much sense for wrestling. Anyway, Donnie, I could do this with you all freaking day. I'm gonna have to get back to Jersey just to sit in that sauna with you again.
You like the sauna?
I do. It's a pretty nice sauna.
You had a good time? Good
I did.
Communion?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. All right. Donnie, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
This is generally the part of the show where I tell people to shout out their social media, but you don't check any of that shit. So I'm just going to say thank you. I appreciate it. And I will make sure that to somehow send you a carrier pigeon when this comes live on the internet. Donnie, thank you, brother.
All right, buddy. Thank you, Mike. Joel, good to
talk to you soon. Wait. Don't go anywhere. Before you hit that next button, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, do us a huge favor. Click that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, leave a review and share it.
What you want to know, man? Welcome to the show.